Today we're exploring the Enneagram system, the 9 different types of people, with my guest, Heath Davis Havlick, an Enneagram mentor. Enjoy. And today I'm really excited to bring on a guest, and we're going to be talking about the Enneagrams. And I've featured the Enneagrams quite a bit on my channel. It's never enough because I think they are one of the richest modalities out there. Years ago, we were laughing when we got on today to meet each other. This is the oldest book out there, I think, on Enneagrams, but you're going to understand a little bit more today because my guest reached out to me because she wanted to highlight this on my channel. And Heath, as you know, my channel is all focused on bringing these beautiful modalities, I always say the wackier the better, to as many people as we can. So in the show notes, your description, your bio, your links to all your social medias will be present so people can explore what they learned today through you. So let's start by getting to know each other, but also please introduce you to my audience.
Sure. So my name is Heath Davis Havlick. I am an author and a speaker. I'm a Riso Hudson certified Enneagram teacher as well. I am a native of California. I'm married to a wonderful man named Tom for 33 years, and we live in a beautiful little area of California in the Santa Cruz Mountains in the Monterey Bay area. So I get to look at redwoods every day, and that is a great blessing.
We're talking about a certain type of Enneagram or the person who trained you. Can you go back to that? Because for my audience, we're going to get into what Enneagrams are, and you're going to teach us a little bit of the perspective or your view, I guess you would call it. But I've never heard that name before. So is it different? Is it a different way of learning, or is it just that person's view?
That's a great question. So I got my certification to teach the Enneagram through the Enneagram Institute. And that was founded by Don Richard Riso and Russ Hudson, who have written many of the foundational books that are underlying Enneagram as we know it today. So there are so many programs available now where you can just go somewhere for a weekend and get a certification and hang up your shingle and start teaching. But I, because of my Enneagram type, really wanted the most rigid and demanding certification that was possible. So that I basically would have street cred, so that people, when they saw that I was a Riso Hudson certified teacher, would have the confidence to know that I know what I'm talking about and I didn't just take like a weekend seminar.
I love that. I love that. So the certification's a big deal. And did it take you years, months? Are you still learning? Do you have to take more classes to continue to be certified with them?
So once you're certified, you're good to go, which is great, but it was very time consuming. I had been taking a class that qualified for the Enneagram certification here and there. But then suddenly in 2018, they made a rule that okay, everyone who's working on certification, you need to be certified by this time next year.
Okay.
So I put the pedal to the metal. And during my lunchtimes at work, I would be, reading books and I would be writing my essays. I had to write 6 essays and I had to do a 2-hour live presentation with a live audience. And then they had to grade all of that in order for me to be certified so that they knew what I was talking about because, that's their name they're putting on my practice. And so they want to make sure that everyone is aligned with what they're doing and aligned with all of the appropriate knowledge.
Got it. Well, let's get our audience involved in what actually that means. And I know you have a whole different way of doing this, and that's what I really want to get into today. I want my audience to really know if they were interested in working with you, what would they expect if they came to you? Do you use it in life coaching? But before we get there, I think we got to give a brief overview, and I'll put up the fancy slides after about what an Enneagram is and how people can use it as a tool, right? Because it is just another archetype, another personality assessment in another way, like astrology is, or Myers-Briggs, to communicate who you are. Does this have more of a spiritual edge to it, or is it is it just energy? So explain that, but first start with what an Enneagram is so my audience can catch up to our conversation.
Sure. The premise of the Enneagram is that of all the billions of people there are in the world, there are only 9 personality types, 9 sort of base models or operating systems. Now, within those operating systems, of course, there's a ton of variety because we're all individual, unique human beings. But each one of those 9 types has a certain set of patterns that they run on, and they are actually neurological pathways in our brains. And so we acquire these personalities or we're born with them. It's not entirely clear. But either way, personality psychologists are clear that by the time you're about 4 years old, your personality is set.
Got it.
So when I first learned the Enneagram, I thought, oh, the goal must be to transcend your personality. And wouldn't that be beautiful if that were possible? But
Yeah.
it's not. So once you have your personality, you've got it for life. But the great thing is that as you learn about these patterns, you can begin to take different steps. You can begin to make different choices that are healthier for you and for your relationships with other people so that you become a healthier and a healthier and a healthier version of who you truly are. Because you're not your Enneagram type. Your number, as it were, and we can talk about
Yeah.
those, is just the place where you got stuck. We actually have the capacities of all 9 types inside of us.
That was going to be
And
one of
some,
my questions.
yeah, and somewhere along the line, because of, the fears that come at us when we're tiny children,
Yeah.
the fears that happen as we develop, we we become less than the fullest essence that we are,
Got
you know?
it.
And so the goal of the Enneagram is actually spiritual work. You asked if that was one of
Yeah.
the goals, and it absolutely is. Because I'll say this, when I first learned the Enneagram, immediately I understood that there's no way I was going to be able to fulfill my divine purpose living a lie, essentially,
Got it.
living according to these patterns that were trying to help me and were trying to defend me against a scary world. They helped a lot when I was a tiny child, but now as an adult, I don't need that anymore. But it's so ingrained, right, that it's difficult to overcome it. And so people think, oh, this is the way life is, and this is how everyone should be. And this makes total sense to my brain. Of course, this is how I should act. Of course, I should yell at my kids. Of course, I
Yeah.
should be selfish. Of course, I should, do this or that. So the Enneagram is this beautiful process of being able to catch yourself in the act. So
Got
you
it.
can recognize, okay, I see what's happening here, and I can choose something better.
I want to add too, because what's showing up for me is astrology, and Myers-Briggs. And I, first of all, love personality types. I managed people for years, and I actually use the Enneagrams in my career, right? So I would profile everybody and everybody would take the test and I knew who I was working with. And it really helped me understand. And our team worked well together because they all understood this person was this and this person was always going to be better if you didn't overmanage them and so on.
Yes.
So my question is, sometimes with astrology, the naysayers will go, oh, it's just so vague. I mean, like, duh, everybody has Aries in them. That my horoscope says this, and it's just so, it could be anybody. It could be, do you think that the Enneagrams are more specific? Because I know there's the wings and all these other things that we can get into. So we tend to be like one number, but then there's aspects of other numbers. And you said we're most likely all 9 because they're personality traits and we're such
Yes.
a dynamic person, right? So, I know I'm asking all over the chart, but when I say all that to you, what comes to mind when we're talking about profiling and people understanding and how this one can benefit people maybe over Myers-Briggs or astrology and as far as the spiritual side goes?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I'll say that what sets the Enneagram apart is that it gets down to the motivations. why it is that we do what we do. And I think that's really the
Yeah.
key. So Myers-Briggs, I really appreciate. I'm an INFJ,
Okay.
just for those who are interested to know. And by the way, that is unusual for an Enneagram 7, which is where I fall on that
Got it.
spectrum. And so Myers-Briggs tells me things about myself that are helpful. It doesn't tell me how to change. It doesn't get down to the motivations, right?
Got
It's
it.
more descriptive, saying this is how your cognitive functions work together, right?
Got it.
The Enneagram says this is your core wounding belief. This is the lie you believe at the center of your being that makes you afraid and then causes you to react in the opposite direction and sends you on this life path of brain patterns that aren't, again, necessarily who you actually are in your inner being.
You just answered that so amazing. So I totally understand that and I totally can see the benefit of knowing that. So how does somebody, they're watching right now and they're going, Enneagrams, this sounds really interesting. How does, I know there's a million tests online, right? If you were going to be working with somebody and you wanted them to kind of open up the door so that they could maybe evaluate or start to look at their own numbers, how does somebody out there in mainstream start? What would you suggest?
Well, there are as many ways to start as there are people, I think. I'll tell you quickly my own journey, which
Yeah,
was that I was not at all looking for any kind of spiritual transformation or development work. I was and still am a writer, and I used to write screenplays in my spare time. And I was noticing that I was really good at a lot of aspects of it, of that process, but I wanted to make more internally consistent characters. And so I kept seeing this book being advertised called The Literary Enneagram. And it said that, if you learned this information, you could write better characters. I thought, okay, I'm going to buy that book. So I bought the book, I started reading through it, and I thought, oh, isn't this fascinating? Isn't this interesting? And then I got to my type, and I wanted to throw the book across the room because I thought, how do people know this about me? What
got
is
it.
going on here?
Yeah.
And that speaks to an earlier question that you had about, the differentiators of the other personality models. And also, is this just too vague? Once you see this, you cannot unsee it.
Got it.
I was stunned by how someone I had never met knew how my brain worked and knew some of the even specific thoughts that I had. So this is not vague. I will say that maybe not every single thing applies
Hmm.
to your type.
Hmm.
For instance, most sevens are extroverts. I am not. I want to stay at home and snuggle and create things and read. None of those require other people, right? None of those require
Okay.
interaction with other people. So again, useful to know my Myers-Briggs type. That helps me understand why I am introverted. But in general, your base Enneagram type is going to fit really well. And most people recognize themselves very quickly. There's one or two types that have a harder time because of their type.
Got it. Give
So
me an
that can be a,
example of those. I would love to hear
okay.
which ones those are.
Yeah. So type 9, for instance, the peacemaker,
Okay.
they want to just agree with everybody. They want to go with the flow because they want peace. And they're concerned that if they interject their own opinion or their own desires, that somebody's going to not want that. It's going to cause relational friction. So instead, they're just going to tamp down all the things they actually want so everyone else can get along. So people of that type make fantastic mediators because they can see all the sides. So, because of that, Enneagram nines can see things in every one of the types that make sense for them, that resonate with them. So, that can be really difficult for them to make a decision and say, yes, this is where I've landed.
I have to share with you, my man is a 9
Okay.
and he cannot stand confrontation. He would be a great negotiator. He sees the sides of all. He's
Yep.
always trying to keep the peace. How he ended up with me, I haven't been able to figure out. But until I learned that that's who he is, because I was like kind of going for the confrontation, right? Because you
Mhm.
guessed I'm probably the achiever, right? So him and I seem to butt heads as far as the way we navigate through a situation. But when I learned all his type, I still use it in every aspect of how we get along today. I didn't know, and I learned through his type that this man actually needs to be alone. I didn't know that, So I'll say, you go there, I'll go this way so you can have your quiet time. I didn't know that. And I was with him 5 years, 6 years before we did this work together. So I love everything you're saying. Keep going. So good.
Yeah, that's one of the great things about the Enneagram is that it's so helpful for romantic relationships, especially, but parent-child relationships, siblings, coworkers, friends, everyone across the board. God, I mean, just every kind of relationship you could imagine, the Enneagram assists with. Before I knew the Enneagram, I would get so frustrated with my husband because he's a 6. He's more pragmatic, he's more realistic, and he's a warrior.
Got it.
So I, as a 7, am optimistic and enthusiastic about everything, and I want to taste all of life. And I've got, pie in the sky for miles. And, I'm the kite and he's the guy on the ground with the string trying to reel me in. And that used to feel really oppressive. Like, why are
Mhm.
you just trying to bum me out all the time? Why don't
Yeah.
you believe in my grand schemes?
Yeah.
Why aren't you excited about all these exciting, wonderful opportunities? And so once I learned the Enneagram, oh my goodness, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. He's dealing with things that I have no concept of.
Just in that same energy, what happens if, and I've heard this with people in doing this work, they 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 don't like their enneagram, right? Like, even though it describes them, it is exactly who they are, and they're like, that can't
Yep.
possibly be me. I'm sure you've worked with people who get into that space. They don't like the label or the things associated with it. What have
Yeah.
you ever worked with somebody who's had that experience? And not that you could not like yourself, maybe that's the problem. What would you say to that?
I have come across that. And the reality is that if you don't like your type, you just don't understand it well enough. Because every type has such beautiful gifts to offer the world. And I think really that that's why God set this system up. It's so that we would need each other. It's so that we would see the gifts that other people have and all be willing to come together and share those gifts. And in that way, we become a whole instead of a bunch of different little fragmented human beings trying to figure out what we're doing on the earth.
Got it.
So, for instance, as a 7, one of my gifts is joy. I'm known for my laugh. It's loud and it's infectious and it's frequent, and that gives people joy when they hear it.
Got it.
I'm also very enthusiastic and optimistic, and I'm an encourager. And those are things that people really need
Appreciate.
and appreciate and love. Yeah. So every type has something or a group of things that are beautiful that the world is waiting for them to express. So don't hate your type. It's a curse, but it's also a blessing.
Yeah.
There are hard things about each type, but there are beautiful ones as well. And again, as you become aware of your stuff, right? As you begin to do the Enneagram work that's necessary, then you can go up the levels of development. Now, that's a system that, again, Riso and Hudson, where I got my certification,
Yeah.
they sort of discovered and then developed this understanding that the Enneagram is not merely a horizontal system where here are the numbers just laid out, but it's also a vertical system of health.
Let's do
Yeah.
this for the audience because now we've piqued their interest. We're learning about enneagrams. We know that it's vertical as well as horizontal. It's not just a number. What happens if you don't like your number? Give us the types. You don't have to go into long descriptions because it's a half an hour interview here, but
Exactly.
just list them off. And then to your point where it goes up or down.
So we'll start with type 1. They're called the perfectionist, right? Things are very black and white. and they know the best way to do everything. And so they're going to let you know when you have not done your best. And at the same time, when they're pointing one finger at you, they're pointing three fingers back at themselves because
Got
they're
it.
much harder on themselves than on other people. Yeah. So
Got it.
that's the type one in a nutshell. Type two is the helper. These are very heart-centered people. They are in actually the heart triad, and they are always looking for who they can help, very relational oriented. And if they're not helping people, it feels like they kind of don't exist. And that's their reason for existing, is to be of help to other people.
I'll tell you, a lot of people watching this right now are twos because most of the people that follow my channel are the helpers as far as they're the healers and not
Mm-hmm.
they do kind of go together, don't they? But I'm sure you're going to say the hardest part about the helper is that they usually don't know when to take care of themselves. They're always trying to take care of everyone else. They're not great about taking care of themselves, so they're people pleasers. So is there some of
Yep.
that in that too?
Absolutely. That is actually the biggest issue, that they deny their own needs. Oh no, I'm not the
Mm.
one who needs things. Other people need things, but of course they need things. And so they end up self-comforting by overeating or shopping or, getting into some kind of addictive behavior to
Got it.
self-comfort so that other people don't feel burdened by them.
Got
Yeah.
it.
So that's a thing twos need to work on. All right, type three is the achiever, as you mentioned just a moment ago. And these folks are really focused on doing everything they can to succeed and to be excellent. And those are great qualities, but the downside of that is that they end up deceiving their own hearts because they don't understand who they actually are and what they actually want to do. They're constantly reading the room and figuring out what people want them to be, and then they become that at the expense of their own identity.
I
All
get it.
right, type four is the individualist, and these folks are so intuitive. They're so connected to what's going on in the world at an emotional level. And life can be very difficult for fours. I think it's the hardest type to be, actually,
Okay.
because they can be perceived as a lot. Like, ooh, that's a lot of emotion happening right there. And a lot of people are not comfortable with that. Most fours either are involved in the arts in some way, or it figures very prominently in their lives to some degree or
Are
other.
these the empaths? Are these, hate to label them that way, but are they the people who take on the world's problems? And
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so that can be a tremendous burden. But by the same token, these are some of the most beautiful and amazing artists that have ever lived in the world. And they can take these universal truths and explain them via the visual arts or dance or poetry or some other way
got it.
that enriches the human experience.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got
So
it.
some of my favorite people are fours, actually. I have some
Okay.
3 or 4 friends. Yeah. All right, so type five is the investigator. They are head types. And so everything is about knowledge. And fives want to be experts at something. They want to find some niche. And in fact, the stranger or the more particular, the better. Oliver Sacks was a five, and he studied the mating habits of one type of worm for like 8 years, right? That
Got
was
it.
his niche, that was his area of expertise. But they tend to be very removed from their own emotions, and they observe their emotions rather than really engaging with them and feeling
Hmm.
them. And so it can be difficult for them to interact with other people and to have really good, lasting relationships.
Got it.
So there's the
Okay.
downside that's possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So type six is the loyalist. You could also call them the loyal skeptic or the devil's advocate, because they're both loyal and skeptical at the same time. So these are the folks who, are the ones who will show up on a Saturday morning if you need to move. They will do whatever is needed. They're such good friends. They're such good group members. They're looking for stability. They're looking for someone or something to believe in. And they're looking for people who can come alongside them and help them get through this scary world, because
Yeah.
fives, sixes, and sevens are all head types and they're all fear types. So we have this fear going on, and we're trying to resolve it in different ways. And so the sixes do that by trying to find people and groups that they can believe in.
Okay.
Yeah. Type seven is the enthusiast. And again, that's my type. So the sort of life of the party people, the great storytellers, a lot of excitement and joy, want to do all the things and travel the world and, go to all the events, etc. So as you can imagine, that's kind of exhausting. And the
Sounds fun.
downside, yeah, one of the main downsides of type seven is that because they're afraid of being trapped in deprivation or pain, they tend to flee from anything that's negative. So it's
Okay.
very hard for sevens to um, metabolize pain. They just want to run from it, not think about it. If someone is coming to them with sadness or crying, nope, I'm not your person.
Got
Go
it.
talk to someone else, or you're bringing me down. Go away, or whatever. So that can definitely be a problem for human relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So type eight is the challenger, and these folks are the entrepreneurs, the captains of industry of the world, the explorers. They have a lot of energy coming from their gut, and so they are going to go out into the world and make things and establish companies and take care of everybody. But they also have this lie in them that everyone's out to get them and they can't trust anyone. So it's very difficult for them to show their very big hearts. It's hard for them to be vulnerable. And so they can come off as just these unfeeling steamrollers who are just going to mow down everything in their way so that they can exert all that energy that they have. So that can be an issue.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then type nine, as I mentioned earlier, is the
Maker.
peacemaker. And they just want everybody to get along and have love together. And that's beautiful. And I want that too. And I think
Yeah.
everyone wants it. But again, at the same time, nines need to be able to claim their own desires and be able to speak out what it is that they actually want. Because when they don't, people just stop asking them what they want and then they get resentful. And then they can explode out of nowhere and freak people out because they're like, whoa, where'd this come from? This peaceful person is now screaming. And then as soon as it's done, they're over it and they move on. But again, not a great way to have a relationship.
Yeah. And it takes them quite a bit to get there, right? Like
Yes.
how much
Yes.
has to be built up is probably relative to each nine. But you did
Exactly.
mention the word triad, and I know what a triad is. There's three different triads, right?
Yeah.
Numbers, and they're where they fall on the Enneagram. And I can put up a beautiful visual right now to show people the Enneagram, what it looks like. So is the triad a triangle in there? Is that how it works? It goes one, two, three, or
It can. Excuse me.
you're good.
So so the triads that I'm speaking of specifically are the ones that separate the head, heart, and gut.
Got it.
And so, yeah, so the eight, nine, and one are in the gut triad. And so they have a lot of energy coming from the center of their body, but they deal with it in different ways, right? As I was saying, the eight is very externally focused, the one's energy is very internally focused, and then the nine goes both ways.
Got
And
it.
so their main emotion is anger or rage. Okay. So then we have the twos, threes, and fours. That is the heart triad. And their primary emotion is shame. Although one Enneagram author recently said it's actually grief because grief is a primary emotion, then shame is a secondary emotion that comes
Hmm.
out of it. I think that's fascinating. I think that that's right on, actually. A
Mhm.
lot of grief going on with those groups underneath the surface. And then, as I just mentioned, the five, six, and seven, they are in the thinking or head triad. And our primary emotion that underlies everything is fear.
Got it. So let's move over to actually working with you and kind of like what your title is, right? So that people can learn more about this through you. Do you have some of this information for people on your YouTube? And as you're talking about the triads, the head, the heart, the gut, right? The three different places. I
Yeah.
did a whole series on the triad on my channel. Do you have stuff too that people could go to on your YouTube? And or is that something you're getting ready to build a little bit more of? Because I know we connected because of a podcast, not so much YouTube. So is that something that people can go to your YouTube channel with?
I do have a lot of information on my YouTube channel, but I would say that for people who want to begin to get more of a foundational understanding, or even an accelerated or advanced understanding, go
Yeah,
to my website because my blog has years worth of information and it's both introductory information and more advanced information.
got it.
I call myself an Enneagram mentor
Hmm.
because I'm someone who, again, continues to learn. There's almost always an Enneagram book that I'm reading, or a seminar that I'm looking at, or a YouTube channel that has good information,
Yeah.
because this is an evolving understanding. So the baseline information is always going to be true, but then there's always more to explore as well. So I feel like I'm someone who's a certain amount of the way along on the journey. And so I want to just come alongside other people and walk with them on that journey.
With everything that's going on in the world right now, maybe you can offer us a spiritual message because we all know what's going on and we are not going to the political side. We're certainly because who wants to go there? We need a break from it,
Exactly.
right? So, but I'm doing a video right now that's talking about the truth, and that seems to be the crux of what why people are freaking out right now. What is the truth? Well, if that's true, well, that's not true. That's fake news. And, everyone's like,
Yeah.
our world is divided. So, with the anagrams and your spiritual practice and, kind of what your message is out for people, can you offer us some divine message right now about what you're seeing in your work that you think might be of service to people, and obviously connect it to somehow the enneagrams and your type, and just respecting people's whatever you can offer us, I think we really could use.
Hmm. Yes, I love that question. The thing that surprised me most about the Enneagram was how deeply it engenders compassion. There's that wonderful saying, be kind because everyone's fighting a hard battle. It's absolutely true. And once you begin to really deeply learn this Enneagram material, you start to understand how hard everybody's battle is,
Got
including
it.
your own.
Got it.
And so I can look at people whose ideas I think are just nutso and like, where did you come up with that crazy idea? Or what have you. But instead of judging them, instead of being angry at them, you can have genuine compassion. I don't have to manufacture it because I understand that we are all just these precious, beloved human beings trying to figure out what is going on the earth and trying to live, a decent and good life every day in the midst of all the chaos and the craziness and the unpredictable things that life throws at us.
Right.
So I would, and to your point, to the point of your entire channel, trying to change the world one person at a time.
Yeah.
That's absolutely what I'm trying to do as well. As you learn this Enneagram information, it changes you significantly and
Yeah.
organically. You
Yeah.
don't even have to force yourself to try to be something else. You just learn this
Yeah.
material, you practice things every day, and it changes you into a more loving, compassionate person. And doesn't the world need more of that?
Oh my gosh. What you're saying, when I hear that, Heath, what I hear you saying is, first off, it helps you accept who you are, right? So you can't hate who you are, and you shouldn't
Hmm.
either way. And
Yep.
then, but also it helps you understand that everybody is from the divine. And, so it puts you in that place, like you're saying, of compassion. And I think Brene Brown's husband said it, and this is her quote from her husband. He said, when I finally realized that everybody that I was running into every day was not out there just trying to piss me off, but that they were actually doing the best that they could do. She goes, when
Yep.
I started to see everybody from that light, and it is light, my life got easier. And I just think it's to that energy. So great message for everybody today. Let's just take a long pause. If you're struggling with what is actually going on, assume that Everybody's light, and yet they're doing their best, and you're doing your best, and do it together. I
Yeah,
love that. That's a divine message. Hey, I think we have gone through the whole gambit. It feels like 2 seconds of time, and you're like, my
I
God,
know.
could this interview absolutely be over by now? But we've been talking so much about so many beautiful things, and I have enjoyed every second of it. So, as we kind of wrap up today, and you knew I was going to interview you, and you were hoping something got said, or you were wondering if this was going to take place. Have I missed anything? Because I really want to make sure that people connect to you, to your channels, and to find out a little bit more so the light that you're putting into the world we can see. Have I missed anything?
No, I don't think so. I super appreciate that question. And I just have also loved this conversation. And I love it that there are people in the world just trying to help other people to be the best possible version of themselves. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And what I would say to people is that spiritual transformation is an act of courage. It's not easy. And otherwise, everyone would do it, right?
Yeah.
But not
Yeah.
everybody's doing it because not everyone's up for it because we intuitively know, okay, we're going to walk into some places that are going to feel uncomfortable, that are going to be hard. We're going to have to confront some things about ourselves that are not awesome. But the work is absolutely worth doing. And honestly, I think it's the work that we're all meant to do.
I love it. I think the word divine is symbiotic or in the same energy as consciousness. I think the truth is connected to that. So I think a lot of what we talked about today is really just in our own profile, right? Just accepting what is and being and honoring it. And I just think that's divine. That's the
Mm-hmm.
divineness you're talking about. I love it. So,
Mm-hmm.
hey, everybody, we are wrapping up today. Heath, thank you so much for your time and attention. Again, everything will be in the show notes today. I want to thank everybody for tapping in and having fun and playing with us as we discover the Enneagram types. So, that's it from us today.
Nope, that's it.
We're good. Bye, everybody. See you next video.